The scissors glinted under the harsh fluorescent lights of the school bathroom as they snipped through Daniel Chen's carefully maintained black hair, each cut echoing like a small explosion in the tiled space. 3 seniors surrounded the 15-year-old sophomore, their laughter bouncing off the walls as chunks of his hair fell to the grimy floor like autumn leaves. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. What they didn't know was that in exactly 30 seconds, their victim would transform from prey to predator, and they would discover that the quiet boy they'd been tormenting had been preparing for this moment his entire life. Daniel Chen had always been different, though not in ways that should have made him a target. At Westfield High School in suburban Denver, Colorado, being Asian and academically gifted was hardly unusual. The school prided itself on diversity and academic excellence, with nearly 30% of its student body being Asian American. But Daniel's difference wasn't his ethnicity or his intelligence, it was his silence. While other students filled hallways with chatter and laughter, Daniel moved through the corridors like a ghost, speaking only when spoken to, keeping his head down and maintaining an almost invisible presence that somehow made him more noticeable. To those who preyed on perceived weakness, the irony wasn't lost on Daniel that his silence, meant to protect him, had instead painted a target on his back. He understood the psychology better than most. Predators in nature always chose the animal that appeared isolated from the herd. In the ecosystem of high school, his self-imposed isolation had marked him as easy prey for students like Ryan Mitchell, Jake Thompson, and Connor Walsh, 3 seniors who ruled the school through a combination of athletic prowess, social connections, and carefully calculated intimidation. Ryan Mitchell was the ringleader, a 6-foot-tall lacrosse captain with dirty blonde hair that he constantly ran his fingers through and green eyes that could shift from charming to cold in an instant. His father owned a successful construction company that had built half the developments in their affluent suburb, and Ryan had inherited both his father's imposing physical presence and his belief that the world owed him deference. Teachers loved him for his quick wit and apparent leadership qualities, never seeing the cruel intelligence that he used to systematically break down anyone he perceived as weak or different. Jake Thompson served as Ryan's lieutenant, a broad-shouldered hockey player whose family had moved to Colorado from Boston when his father took a position at a major tech company. Jake's Massachusetts accent had faded over the years, but his aggressive Boston attitude remained intact. He was the muscle of the group, the one who turned Ryan's psychological warfare into physical intimidation. His red hair and freckled face gave him an almost innocent appearance that belied his capacity for cruelty, and he took particular pleasure in the physical aspects of their bullying campaigns. Connor Walsh completed the trio as the strategist, a lean cross-country runner whose pale complexion and wire-rimmed glasses made him look more like a scholar than a bully. His parents were both doctors at Denver General Hospital, and Connor had inherited their analytical minds, which he used to identify weaknesses in their targets and devise increasingly sophisticated methods of torment. He was the one who researched their victims, learning their schedules, their fears, and their pressure points with the dedication of a scientist studying lab rats. Together, they formed a perfect storm of adolescent cruelty, each bringing different skills to their systematic campaign of harassment. They were smart enough to avoid the obvious forms of bullying that would get them suspended, instead focusing on psychological warfare and social isolation that was harder for adults to detect and address. They had perfected the art of plausible deniability, always ensuring that their worst actions occurred away from cameras and witnesses who might report them. Daniel had become their latest project 3 months ago, shortly after the start of his sophomore year. The targeting had begun, as it often did, almost randomly. He had been eating lunch alone in the library, quietly reading a programming manual while eating a sandwich his mother had packed for him, when Ryan had noticed him and made a casual comment to his friends about the weird Asian kid who thinks he's too good to eat with everyone else. It was the kind of throwaway observation that might have been forgotten by most teenagers, but Ryan's friends had laughed, and that laughter had been enough to mark Daniel as their next victim. The harassment had started subtly. Books knocked from his hands in the hallway, always with profuse apologies and claims of clumsiness. His locker mysteriously jammed with chewing gum in the lock. His lunch tray accidentally bumped, sending food across the cafeteria floor. These incidents occurred with just enough frequency to be obviously intentional, but never so obviously that Daniel could prove malicious intent to administrators who were already overwhelmed with more serious disciplinary issues. As weeks passed, the campaign had escalated. They began spreading rumors about his family, claiming his parents were here illegally, despite the fact that both had been born in California. They created fake social media accounts to send him anonymous messages, filled with racial slurs and threats. They started a whisper campaign, suggesting he was getting special treatment from teachers because of his race, poisoning the well of potential friendships with other students who might have otherwise been allies. The psychological warfare was expertly crafted to isolate Daniel completely. Ryan understood that their ultimate goal wasn't just to hurt their victim, but to ensure he had nowhere to turn for help. They systematically undermined his relationships with teachers by framing him for minor infractions, a stink bomb in the chemistry lab that they set off but blamed on him, graffiti in the bathroom that they claimed to have seen him writing. Each incident was small enough that Daniel couldn't prove his innocence, but damaging enough to erode the trust and goodwill of the adults who might have protected him. Daniel's parents, Dr. Michael Chen and Dr. Sarah Chen, were both cardiologists at Presbyterian St. Joseph Hospital, working long hours to build their practice and provide for their family. They had immigrated to the United States from Taiwan when Daniel was 2 years old, part of a wave of highly educated professionals seeking better opportunities for their children. They embodied the model minority stereotype that Ryan and his friends resented: hardworking, successful, and focused on education as the path to advancement. The Chens had sacrificed enormously to give Daniel every advantage. They lived modestly despite their substantial income, saving money for Daniel's college education and his younger sister Emma's future needs. They had chosen Westfield specifically for its excellent schools and safe neighborhoods, believing that academic excellence would shield their children from the prejudice they had occasionally encountered in their medical careers. They worked such demanding schedules that they often missed the subtle signs of their son's distress, interpreting his increasing withdrawal as typical teenage behavior rather than evidence of systematic harassment. Daniel's sister Emma was in 8th grade at the middle school, a bubbly and outgoing girl who had inherited their mother's social skills and their father's analytical mind. She was everything Daniel wasn't: popular, confident, and seemingly immune to the social pressures that tormented her brother. She adored Daniel and looked up to him as her academic role model, never knowing that the brother she admired was slowly being destroyed by his classmates' cruelty. Daniel worked hard to shield her from his problems, maintaining a cheerful facade at home even as his world crumbled around him at school. The isolation had been the worst part for Daniel. Ryan's campaign had been so effective that even well-meaning students avoided him, afraid of becoming targets themselves. Teachers who had once praised his academic work now viewed him with suspicion. After the series of framed incidents, he ate lunch alone every day, spent breaks hiding in empty classrooms, and walked home by circuitous routes to avoid encountering his tormentors outside of school hours. But what Ryan and his friends didn't know was that Daniel's silence wasn't born from weakness or fear. It was learned behavior from years of careful observation and strategic thinking. Daniel had been studying his tormentors with the same methodical approach he applied to his computer programming projects, cataloging their methods, documenting their actions, and slowly building a comprehensive understanding of their psychology and tactics. He had been preparing for the moment when passive resistance would no longer be sufficient, when he would need to shift from defense to offense. Daniel's interest in technology had begun early, nurtured by parents who recognized his natural aptitude and provided him with every resource he needed to develop his skills. By age 12, he was building his own computers from scratch. By 13, he was creating sophisticated programs that impressed even his computer science teachers. By 14, he had started exploring the darker corners of the internet, learning about digital forensics, social engineering, and information security with the curiosity of a naturally gifted hacker. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. His bedroom was a testament to his technical prowess, filled with multiple monitors, custom-built computers, and an impressive array of electronic equipment that he had assembled over years of birthday and Christmas gifts. His parents saw it as an expensive but worthwhile investment in their son's future, never imagining that he was using these tools to gather intelligence on his enemies and prepare for psychological warfare that would make their own tactics look amateurish by comparison. Daniel had spent months learning everything he could about Ryan, Jake, and Connor. He knew their class schedules, their after-school activities, their social media accounts, and their family dynamics. He had infiltrated their friend networks through carefully constructed fake profiles, gathering screenshots of their private conversations, and building a comprehensive dossier of their activities both in and out of school. He had identified their insecurities, their secrets, and their pressure points with the precision of a military intelligence analyst. More importantly, Daniel had been documenting everything they did to him. Hidden cameras in his locker captured them vandalizing his belongings. Audio recordings on his phone preserved their threatening whispers in hallways. Screenshots saved every anonymous message and social media post they had directed at him. He had built an ironclad case that would destroy them completely, but he had been waiting for the right moment to deploy his evidence, waiting for them to cross a line that would justify the nuclear option he had prepared. The haircutting incident had been Connor's idea, born from his analytical observation that Daniel's carefully maintained appearance was one of the few sources of pride he had left. Connor had noticed that Daniel spent time each morning styling his hair, that he kept it at a precise length, and that he seemed to draw confidence from his neat, professional appearance. It was a perceptive insight that demonstrated Connor's understanding of psychological warfare. Destroy someone's sense of self-presentation, and you destroy a fundamental part of their identity. The plan had been executed with military precision. They had waited until the last period of Friday afternoon, when most students had already left for the weekend and teacher supervision was minimal. They had positioned themselves in the second-floor bathroom that was rarely used after school hours, ensuring they would have privacy for their assault. They had brought scissors from the art room along with a phone to record the humiliation for later distribution on social media. Daniel had been walking to his locker when Jake had approached him with a friendly smile, claiming that Ryan wanted to apologize for their recent behavior and asking if Daniel would meet them in the bathroom to talk privately. It was a transparent trap, but Daniel had followed anyway, knowing that the moment he had been preparing for had finally arrived. He had activated the recording app on his phone before entering the bathroom, ensuring that everything that followed would be captured in high-definition audio and automatically uploaded to multiple cloud storage accounts. The actual haircutting had lasted less than 2 minutes, but those 2 minutes contained enough footage to destroy all 3 of his tormentors completely. They had laughed and joked as they grabbed him, holding him against the sink while Connor carefully cut chunks from his hair in the most humiliating pattern possible. They had made racist jokes about his appearance, discussed how they were going to share the video online, and revealed details about their other victims that demonstrated a pattern of systematic harassment spanning multiple years. But as the last piece of Daniel's hair fell to the bathroom floor, something in his demeanor shifted. The scared, passive victim they had been tormenting for months disappeared, replaced by someone who radiated quiet confidence and barely contained power. Daniel straightened his shoulders, adjusted his shirt, and smiled at his tormentors with an expression that made Jake unconsciously step backward. Ryan noticed the change first, his predator instincts alert to the shift in power dynamics. "What are you smiling about, freak?" he demanded, but there was uncertainty in his voice that hadn't been there moments before. Daniel pulled out his phone, and for a moment, Ryan thought he was going to call for help or try to take a picture. Instead, Daniel opened an app that none of them recognized and showed them the screen. "Do you know what this is?" he asked quietly, his voice carrying a authority that none of them had ever heard from him before. Connor leaned forward to look at the screen, his analytical mind immediately recognizing the implications of what he was seeing. "That's a live streaming app," he said slowly, the color draining from his face as he realized what Daniel had done. "Very good, Connor," Daniel said with genuine appreciation. "Your parents raised a smart boy. Yes, this is a live streaming app. Specifically, it's a security app that's been broadcasting everything that happened in this bathroom for the past 5 minutes to a private server that automatically forwards copies to multiple recipients if I don't check in every 10 minutes. Jake was still processing the information, his slower mind struggling to understand the implications. "You can't record us without permission. That's illegal." Daniel's smile widened. "Actually, Jake, Colorado is a one-party consent state for recording. I can record any conversation I'm part of without anyone else's permission. My parents taught me that when I was 12, right around the same time they were teaching me about digital evidence preservation and cyberbullying laws." Ryan's hands clenched into fists, his first instinct always violence when his authority was challenged. "Give me that phone right now." "I wouldn't do that if I were you," Daniel said calmly, not moving away from Ryan's threatening posture. "You see, this stream is being monitored in real time by a security company my parents hired after the 3rd time someone broke into my locker. If I don't deactivate the alert in exactly 27 seconds, they automatically call the police and forward all the recorded evidence to the school administration, the district superintendent, and the state athletic association." Connor's mind was racing through the implications, his analytical nature allowing him to see the full scope of the trap they had walked into. "How long have you been planning this?" 3 months, Daniel replied, matter-of-factly. "Ever since you started your little campaign against me. Did you really think I wouldn't notice? Did you think I would just quietly accept being your victim forever?" The bathroom fell silent, except for the drip of a leaky faucet and the hum of fluorescent lights. For the first time in months, Ryan Mitchell was speechless, his mind struggling to process the fact that his carefully chosen victim had outmaneuvered him completely. Daniel continued speaking in the same calm, measured tone. "I know everything about all 3 of you. I know about your weekend drinking parties at Jake's house while his parents are out of town. I know about the steroids you've been buying from Derek Martinez in the parking lot behind the gym, Ryan. I know about the essays Connor's been selling to underclassmen through encrypted messaging apps. I know about the fake IDs you used to get into that casino in Black Hawk last month, and I have the security footage to prove it." Each revelation hit them like a physical blow. These weren't random accusations. They were specific, detailed, and accurate. Daniel had spent months gathering intelligence on his enemies, building a comprehensive case that would destroy not just their high school careers, but their college prospects and possibly their futures. 20 seconds, Daniel announced, checking his phone. What's it going to be? Do I let the security company call the police, or do we discuss terms for a peaceful resolution to this situation? Jake was the first to break, his limited imagination allowing him to see only the immediate consequences of what would happen if Daniel's evidence went public. Dude, my hockey scholarship will be gone. My parents will kill me. Connor was calculating odds and outcomes with his analytical mind, trying to find an angle that would give them some leverage in what had become a completely reversed power dynamic. What do you want? He asked quietly. 15 seconds, Daniel said, then looked directly at Ryan. I want you to get on your knees and apologize, not just to me, but to every person you've bullied in the past 3 years. I want you to admit that you're a coward who picks on people, weaker than yourself because it makes you feel powerful. I want you to beg me not to destroy your pathetic little kingdom. Ryan's face flushed red with rage and humiliation. I'm not apologizing to anyone, especially not some weird 10 seconds, Daniel interrupted. Your choice, Ryan. Swallow your pride for 30 seconds, or spend the next 4 years explaining to college admissions boards why you were expelled for assault, racial harassment, and steroid use. The number countdown was psychological warfare at its finest. Daniel understood that Ryan's entire identity was built on being in control, on being the predator rather than the prey, forcing him to make a decision under time pressure with his friends watching would be the ultimate humiliation for someone who had spent years carefully crafting his image as untouchable. 5 seconds, Daniel announced, his finger hovering over his phone screen. Connor grabbed Ryan's arm. Do it, man. We can't afford to have this go public. 4. Jake was backing toward the bathroom door, ready to run rather than face the consequences of their actions. 3. Ryan's carefully maintained composure finally cracked. The golden boy who had terrorized underclassmen for years was facing the destruction of everything he had worked to build, and he didn't have the emotional tools to handle the reversal. 2. Wait! Ryan shouted, his voice cracking with desperation. Don't send it, please! Daniel paused, his finger still poised over the screen. Are you begging me, Ryan? I want to hear you say it clearly. The tears that started rolling down Ryan Mitchell's face were the first genuine emotion Daniel had seen from him in 3 months of systematic harassment. The mask of confident cruelty had finally slipped, revealing the insecure teenager underneath who had built his entire identity on making others feel small. I'm begging you, Ryan whispered, the words barely audible in the tiled bathroom. Please, don't send the video. But Daniel Chen wasn't finished with them yet. 3 months of careful planning had led to this moment, and he intended to make it count. The quiet boy they had chosen as their victim was about to teach them a lesson in power that they would never forget. The transformation was complete. In the span of 30 seconds, the power dynamic in that bathroom had shifted so completely that it would reshape the entire social hierarchy of Westfield High School. And Daniel Chen, who had been a victim for so long, was just getting started. Daniel's finger moved away from the screen, but the relief that washed over Ryan's face was premature. The sophisticated revenge that Daniel had orchestrated was just beginning, and what happened next would demonstrate the difference between a bully's crude intimidation and a true strategist's methodical destruction of his enemies. 1 second remaining, Daniel announced, his voice carrying the same calm authority that had emerged when the power dynamic shifted. But I'm feeling generous today. The immediate alert is cancelled. Jake exhaled loudly, his broad shoulders sagging with what he mistook for salvation. Connor adjusted his wire-rimmed glasses nervously, his analytical mind still processing the full implications of their situation. Ryan wiped his eyes quickly, trying to restore some semblance of his former confidence now that the immediate threat seemed to have passed. But Daniel wasn't finished. He tapped his phone screen again, opening a different application that displayed a complex dashboard filled with data streams, file directories, and what appeared to be multiple video feeds. However, the recording is still active, and everything you've done in the past 3 months has been documented. Every racist comment, every threat, every act of vandalism. I have it all. Connor leaned closer, his scientific curiosity overriding his fear for a moment. The application Daniel was showing them looked professional, far more sophisticated than anything a high school student should have access to. What is that software? Something I designed myself, Daniel replied with a hint of pride. It's a comprehensive surveillance and evidence management system. I've been beta testing it on you 3 for the past few months. Consider yourselves my unwitting research subjects. The casual way Daniel described turning them into test subjects sent a chill through all 3 bullies. They were beginning to understand that the quiet boy they had targeted wasn't just smart, he was operating on a level of strategic thinking that none of them had anticipated. Ryan tried to reassert some control over the situation, falling back on the intimidation, tactics that had always worked before. You think you're so clever, but you're still just a weird little freak who doesn't belong here. Nobody's going to believe your word against ours. Daniel's smile never wavered. That's the beautiful thing about digital evidence, Ryan. It doesn't rely on anyone's word. Facts speak for themselves. He swiped to another screen showing a detailed timeline with timestamps and file attachments. October 15th, 2:37 p.m. Jake shoved me into a locker while calling me a chink and telling me to go back to China. High-definition video from 3 angles, crystal clear. Audio. Jake's face went pale. How could you have recorded that? There weren't any cameras in that hallway. There weren't any visible cameras, Daniel corrected. I've been wearing recording devices for months, tiny ones, completely undetectable. Every interaction we've had has been preserved for posterity. He scrolled through the timeline, each entry representing another nail in their collective coffin. October 22nd, Connor posted my home address on an anonymous message board with suggestions about what people should do with Asian invaders. November 3rd, Ryan created a fake Instagram account to send me death threats. November 18th, all 3 of you cornered me in the parking lot and threatened to teach me a lesson if I didn't stop acting like I owned the place. The systematic documentation was overwhelming. Daniel hadn't just been passively enduring their harassment, he had been building a legal case with the thoroughness of a prosecutor preparing for trial. Each incident was time-stamped, geotagged, and corroborated with multiple forms of evidence. Connor's analytical mind was working frantically, trying to find some weakness in Daniel's position. Even if you have all that, you can't prove we did anything today. We could say you cut your own hair and tried to frame us. Daniel's expression didn't change, but there was something predatory in his eyes now, a glimpse of the strategic mind that had been hidden behind months of apparent passivity. Could you really? He opened another application, this one showing a live video feed of the bathroom where they were standing. This bathroom has been under surveillance for the past week. I've been monitoring your conversations, learning your plans. I knew you were going to try something today because Connor discussed it with Jake outside the chemistry lab yesterday at 3:25 p.m. He played a brief audio clip of Connor's voice. We need to do something bigger, something that will really break him. I was thinking we could mess with his hair. It's obviously important to him. The blood drained from Connor's face as he heard his own words played back to him. The realization that Daniel had been several steps ahead of them all along was devastating to someone who prided himself on being the smartest person in the room. "The beauty of my system," Daniel continued, his voice taking on the tone of a professor explaining a complex concept to slow students, "is that it doesn't just record individual incidents. It establishes patterns. It shows premeditation. It demonstrates a conspiracy to commit assault and harassment based on racial bias. Do you understand what that means in legal terms?" None of them answered, but their expressions showed they were beginning to grasp the magnitude of their situation. "It means that instead of being treated as isolated pranks or teenage misbehavior, your actions constitute systematic harassment with racial motivations. That elevates everything to the level of hate crimes, which carry much more serious consequences." Ryan's voice was barely a whisper. "What do you want from us?" Daniel closed the applications on his phone and looked at each of them in turn, his gaze clinical and measuring. "I want you to understand that everything you thought you knew about power dynamics in this school just changed. I want you to realize that intelligence and preparation will always defeat brute force and social status. But most importantly, I want you to make a choice." He reached into his backpack and pulled out a tablet, opening it to display what appeared to be a contract or legal document. "I'm going to give you an opportunity to resolve this situation without involving law enforcement or school administration. But it requires your complete cooperation and absolute commitment to changing your behavior." Jake squinted at the tablet screen. "What kind of contract?" "A comprehensive agreement that outlines exactly how your rehabilitation will proceed," Daniel explained. "Think of it as a plea bargain. You admit your guilt, accept responsibility for your actions, and agree to a specific program of community service and behavioral modification. In exchange, I agree not to release the evidence I've gathered to authorities." Connor's legal training from his doctor parents kicked in. "What kind of community service?" "The kind that will teach you empathy and respect for people different from yourselves," Daniel replied. "Ryan, you'll be volunteering at the Asian Cultural Center downtown, helping elderly immigrants with English classes and citizenship preparation. Jake, you'll be working with the Special Olympics hockey program, learning what real courage looks like from athletes who overcome genuine challenges. Connor, you'll be tutoring underprivileged middle school students in math and science, discovering what it means to use your intelligence to help others instead of hurt them." The specificity of the assignments wasn't accidental. Daniel had researched each of them thoroughly enough to design consequences that would directly address their individual character flaws. Ryan's casual racism would be confronted by direct exposure to the immigrant community he disparaged. Jake's tendency toward violence would be redirected toward helping disabled athletes who showed more real strength than he ever had. Connor's intellectual arrogance would be humbled by working with children who lacked his advantages but possessed genuine enthusiasm for learning. "How many hours?" Ryan asked, his voice hollow. 200 hours each, to be completed over the next 6 months, with full documentation and supervisor evaluations that will be submitted to me weekly. The number was staggering. 200 hours was equivalent to 5 full work weeks, time that would have to be carved out of their social lives, athletic commitments, and college preparation activities. "But that's not all," Daniel continued. "You'll also be writing detailed letters of apology to every person you've bullied in the past 3 years. Not generic form letters, but specific acknowledgements of what you did wrong and how you plan to make amends. These letters will be reviewed by me for sincerity and accuracy before being delivered." Connor pushed his glasses up nervously. "How could you possibly know who we've bullied?" Daniel's smile was almost pitying. "Connor, I've had access to your social media accounts, your text messages, and your email for over 2 months. I know about Marcus Rodriguez, the freshman you convinced to transfer schools after spreading rumors about his family's immigration status. I know about Sarah Kim, the sophomore you drove to a suicide attempt with your coordinated campaign of harassment. I know about David Thompson, Jake's younger brother, who you've been tormenting since middle school. Each name hit them like a physical blow. The systematic nature of Daniel's intelligence gathering was becoming clear. He hadn't just been documenting their crimes against him, but building a comprehensive case file of their entire history of bullying behavior. Jake's voice cracked as he spoke. David never told anyone we were bothering him. David didn't have to tell anyone, Daniel replied coldly. I've been monitoring your communications for months. I have screenshots of every cruel message you sent him, recordings of every threat you made. Your own brother was so terrified of you that he started taking anxiety medication prescribed by a family doctor who had no idea what was really causing his problems. The revelation about David was clearly devastating to Jake. Despite his capacity for cruelty toward others, he had somehow managed to compartmentalize his treatment of his younger brother, perhaps telling himself it was normal sibling rivalry rather than systematic abuse. That's impossible, Jake protested weakly. David would never what? Report his own brother for making his life miserable? You're right, he wouldn't. But he did start keeping a journal on his phone about his feelings, trying to cope with the depression and anxiety you were causing him. That journal makes for very compelling reading, especially the entries about how he considered running away from home to escape you. Daniel swiped to another screen on his tablet, showing what appeared to be diary entries with timestamps and emotional content that painted a devastating picture of a younger brother's suffering. Ryan tried to regain some control over the negotiation. Even if all that's true, you can't prove we were the only ones involved. There were other people who I also have evidence against, Daniel interrupted. Did you think your little network of followers was invisible to me? I know about Tyler, Brandon, and Kevin. I know about the group chat where you planned your harassment campaigns. I know about the betting pool you created to see who could make their targets cry first. The comprehensive scope of Daniel's surveillance operation was becoming clear. He hadn't just been gathering evidence against his primary tormentors. He had been mapping their entire social network, identifying every participant in their culture of cruelty. Connor's analytical mind was finally grasping the full implications of their situation. You've been planning this for months. This whole thing, getting us to target you, documenting everything, even letting us escalate to cutting your hair, it was all part of some kind of elaborate trap. Daniel nodded approvingly. Very good, Connor. Yes, I've been manipulating the situation from the beginning. Every response I made to your harassment was calculated to encourage you to escalate further. I needed you to cross clear legal lines that would give me maximum leverage. The haircutting was the perfect culmination. It's assault, it's on video, and it demonstrates the racist nature of your motivations. The realization that they had been manipulated so completely was crushing to their egos. They had thought they were predators hunting easy prey, but they had actually been mice being led through a maze by a researcher studying their behavior. So, what happens if we don't sign your contract? Ryan asked, though his tone suggested he already knew the answer wouldn't be pleasant. Daniel pulled up another application on his tablet, this one showing what appeared to be email drafts addressed to various official organizations. Then I send everything to the police, the school board, the district attorney, the state athletic association, and every college that you've applied to. I also publish a comprehensive report on social media detailing your 3-year campaign of racist harassment and systematic bullying. He scrolled through the email list, each recipient representing another nail in their future coffins. The evidence package includes over 40 hours of video documentation, 300 pages of message transcripts, detailed psychological profiles of your victims, and expert analysis of your behavioral patterns provided by Dr. Elizabeth Martinez, a forensic psychologist who specializes in adolescent harassment cases. Connor's face went white. Dr. Martinez evaluated our behavior extensively, Daniel confirmed. She was very interested in your case when I presented it to her as research for a paper on cyberbullying patterns. Her analysis concludes that all three of you exhibit classic signs of sociopathic behavior with strong likelihood of escalation to more serious criminal activity if left unchecked. The professional psychological evaluation added a level of credibility to Daniel's case that transformed it from a simple harassment complaint into a comprehensive criminal justice study. Dr. Martinez was well known in Colorado legal circles, and her involvement would give the evidence package credibility that couldn't be dismissed or minimized. Jake was starting to panic, his limited ability to process complex situations overwhelmed by the scope of the consequences he was facing. This is insane. You can't just destroy our entire lives because we picked on you a little bit. Daniel's expression hardened, and for the first time, genuine anger broke through his calm facade. Picked on me a little bit? Jake, you and your friends spent 3 months trying to drive me to suicide. You spread racist propaganda about my family. You vandalized my property, threatened my safety, and attempted to destroy my academic and social prospects. You didn't pick on me. You waged psychological warfare against a 15-year-old boy whose only crime was being different from you. The passion in Daniel's voice was the first real emotion he had shown since the power dynamic shifted, and it reminded his tormentors that underneath his strategic planning and technological sophistication, he was still a teenager who had been genuinely hurt by their actions. Sarah Kim attempted suicide because of your harassment campaign, Daniel continued, his voice growing stronger. Marcus Rodriguez developed an eating disorder and had to be hospitalized because you convinced half the school that his family were drug dealers. David Thompson has been cutting himself to cope with the anxiety you've caused him. You didn't just pick on people. You systematically destroyed vulnerable children for your own entertainment. The litany of consequences was devastating. None of the 3 bullies had ever been forced to confront the real impact of their actions on their victims. They had compartmentalized their cruelty, treating it as harmless fun rather than acknowledging the genuine psychological damage they were inflicting. Connor tried one last time to find an angle that might give them some leverage. If you had evidence of all this, why didn't you report it months ago? Why did you let it continue? Daniel's smile returned, but it was colder now, more predatory. Because I needed you to commit crimes serious enough to justify the punishment I had planned. Harassment and cyberbullying are misdemeanors with minimal consequences. But assault with racial motivations, conspiracy to commit hate crimes, and systematic stalking of multiple victims, those are felonies that carry real prison time. The legal sophistication of Daniel's planning was breathtaking. He had essentially allowed himself to be victimized for months in order to gather evidence of more serious crimes that would carry meaningful consequences for his tormentors. You let us hurt you deliberately, Ryan said, a note of horrified admiration creeping into his voice. I sacrificed short-term comfort for long-term justice, Daniel corrected. Every day you made my life miserable was another day I gathered evidence that would eventually destroy you. Every escalation you chose was another step deeper into the legal trap I had prepared. He opened his tablet to a calendar application showing detailed timelines and strategic checkpoints. I've been working toward this moment since the first day you targeted me. Every response I made was calculated to encourage you to continue and escalate. When you knocked books from my hands, I made sure to look vulnerable and afraid, encouraging you to try more direct physical contact. When you spread rumors about my family, I appeared to be isolated and friendless, making me seem like a safer target for more serious harassment. The realization that Daniel had been manipulating their behavior all along was perhaps the most devastating blow to their egos. They had prided themselves on being clever predators, but they had actually been playing out a script written by their intended victim. Ryan's voice was barely audible. "How long do we have to decide?" Daniel checked his watch with theatrical precision. "You have until Monday morning at 8 a.m. to email me your signed contracts and begin your community service assignments. If I don't receive confirmation that you've started your rehabilitation program by then, the evidence package goes public automatically." "But that's only 3 days," Jake protested. "3 days is generous," Daniel replied. "I could have sent everything tonight and let you deal with the consequences over the weekend. Instead, I'm giving you time to make arrangements with your families, contact your volunteer supervisors, and begin taking responsibility for your actions." Connor was already mentally calculating the logistics. "The community service organizations won't be open over the weekend. How are we supposed to arrange everything by Monday morning?" Daniel pulled out a folder from his backpack and handed each of them a packet of papers. "I've already contacted all the relevant organizations and explained the situation. Your supervisors are expecting your calls tomorrow morning. Contact information, schedules, and requirements are all included in your packets." The level of preparation was staggering. Daniel had anticipated every question, planned for every contingency, and prepared solutions for every logistical challenge. He had essentially created a complete alternative justice system, tailored specifically for their rehabilitation. "There's one more thing," Daniel added, his tone becoming even more serious. "This agreement isn't just about community service and apology letters. You're also going to help me transform the entire culture of this school." Ryan looked up from his packet. "What does that mean?" "It means you're going to become advocates against bullying. You're going to use your social status and influence to create an environment where what happened to me never happens to anyone else again." Daniel opened his tablet to show them a detailed presentation outlining what appeared to be a comprehensive anti-bullying program. "You're going to speak at assemblies about your behavior and its consequences. You're going to mentor younger students who show signs of becoming bullies themselves. You're going to work with school counselors to identify and help victims of harassment." The irony was profound. The same social influence they had used to create a culture of cruelty would now be redirected toward protecting potential victims. "Ryan, as lacrosse captain, you're going to implement new team policies about hazing and harassment. Jake, you're going to work with the hockey coach to eliminate the toxic masculinity that pervades the athletic programs. Connor, you're going to use your academic reputation to create peer tutoring programs that build up struggling students instead of making them targets." Each assignment was specifically designed to force them to use their strengths and positions of influence in constructive rather than destructive ways. Daniel had essentially created a program that would transform the school's power structure by converting its primary enforcers into protectors of the vulnerable. "And if anyone asks why you're suddenly so interested in stopping bullying," Connor asked, "you tell them the truth," Daniel replied simply. "You tell them that you used to be bullies yourselves, but you learned that your behavior was wrong and decided to change. You tell them about the real impact your actions had on your victims. You become living examples of the fact that people can change if they're willing to face the consequences of their actions." The transformation Daniel was proposing went far beyond simple punishment. It was a complete rehabilitation program designed to turn perpetrators into advocates for their former victims. Ryan was staring at his packet, slowly processing the full scope of what Daniel was asking of him. "This will change everything. Our friends, our social status, our entire identity at this school." Yes, Daniel agreed. That's exactly the point. The social hierarchy that allowed you to terrorize vulnerable students unchecked needs to be dismantled. You're going to help me rebuild it into something better. Jake looked up from his packet with genuine confusion. Why would you trust us to actually follow through with any of this? What's to stop us from just pretending to cooperate until you graduate and then going back to the way things were? Daniel's smile was almost fond, as if Jake had asked exactly the question he had been hoping for. Because I'm not going anywhere. Jake, my parents have decided that they want to stay in this community long term. I'll be here for another 2.5 years, and I'll be watching everything you do. He opened another application on his tablet, showing what appeared to be a monitoring dashboard. But more importantly, I've already begun training other students to recognize and document bullying behavior. Sarah Kim, Marcus Rodriguez, David Thompson, and 12 other former victims are now part of a network that will ensure this school never returns to its previous culture of tolerance for harassment. The revelation that Daniel had been organizing a counter-network of former victims was the final piece of his comprehensive strategy. He hadn't just been planning to defeat his own bullies. He had been building a system to protect all future potential victims. You're creating some kind of student surveillance network? Connor asked, his scientific mind fascinated despite the personal threat it represented. I'm creating an accountability system, Daniel corrected. Students who have been victims of bullying are uniquely qualified to identify the early warning signs in others. They're also highly motivated to prevent other people from experiencing what they went through. He showed them screenshots of what appeared to be a secure messaging application. Every student in the network has access to reporting tools that allow them to document incidents in real time. The evidence is automatically compiled and forwarded to appropriate authorities when patterns of harassment are identified. The scope of Daniel's vision was breathtaking. He had essentially created a parallel justice system specifically designed to address the gaps in traditional school disciplinary procedures. Ryan was beginning to understand the true magnitude of what Daniel had accomplished. You've been planning to change the entire school system since the beginning, haven't you? We were never really your primary targets. We were just test cases for a larger project. Daniel nodded approvingly. Very perceptive, Ryan. Yes, you three were essentially the proof of concept for a comprehensive approach to eliminating systematic bullying in educational environments. Your behavior provided me with the perfect opportunity to develop and test methodologies that can now be applied more broadly. The clinical way Daniel described their persecution as a research opportunity was chilling, but it also demonstrated the level of strategic thinking that had gone into every aspect of his plan. Connor was staring at his tablet screen, his analytical mind working through the implications of everything Daniel had revealed. This is actually brilliant, he said quietly. You've created a self-reinforcing system that makes bullying increasingly difficult while providing support networks for potential victims. Thank you, Daniel replied with genuine appreciation. I've spent considerable time studying organizational psychology and social dynamics. The traditional approaches to bullying prevention have failed because they treat it as individual behavior problems rather than systemic cultural issues. He opened his tablet to show them research papers and academic studies. Effective change requires addressing the entire ecosystem that allows harassment to flourish. That means changing the power structures, altering the social incentives, and creating accountability mechanisms that make the costs of bullying behavior higher than the benefits. The academic rigor behind Daniel's approach was impressive, but it also highlighted the vast difference between his sophisticated understanding of social dynamics and their crude application of dominance behaviors. Jake was looking overwhelmed by the complexity of everything Daniel had shown them. I don't understand half of what you're talking about, but it sounds like you've basically declared war on everyone who acts like we do. Not war, Daniel corrected, gently. Evolution. I'm providing opportunities for people to become better versions of themselves. The students who choose to change and grow will find support and community. Those who insist on maintaining destructive behaviors will find themselves increasingly isolated and accountable for their choices. He closed his tablet and looked at each of them directly. You have a choice to make. You can be pioneers in this transformation, using your experience and influence to help create a better environment for everyone. Or you can be cautionary tales, examples of what happens to people who refuse to evolve when their environment changes around them. The ultimatum was clear, but it was also an invitation. Daniel was offering them a path toward redemption that would allow them to maintain some dignity while accepting responsibility for their actions. Ryan looked at his friends, then back at Daniel. And if we do everything you're asking, the community, service, the apology letters, the anti-bullying advocacy, you'll really keep all that evidence confidential. As long as you complete the program successfully and demonstrate genuine change in your behavior, yes, Daniel confirmed. But understand that the monitoring continues indefinitely. Any relapse into harassment or bullying behavior will result in immediate release of all evidence, plus documentation of your failure to honor the rehabilitation agreement. The long-term nature of the accountability was perhaps the most effective deterrent. Daniel wasn't just punishing past behavior, he was creating incentives for permanent change. Connor was reading through his packet more carefully, his analytical, mind processing the detailed requirements and expectations. This is actually a very comprehensive behavioral modification program. Did you design this yourself? I consulted with experts in psychology, criminology, and education, Daniel replied. Dr. Martinez provided input on the rehabilitation components, and I worked with community service coordinators to ensure the assignments would be meaningful rather than just punitive. The professional consultation added another layer of credibility to Daniel's program, suggesting that it had been designed with genuine therapeutic value rather than just revenge. Jake was still struggling to process the complete reversal of their situation. I just don't understand how you planned all this. How did you know we would target you specifically? Daniel's expression became more serious, and for a moment, the strategic mask slipped to reveal something more vulnerable underneath. Because I studied the patterns of behavior at this school. Before my family moved here, I researched the social dynamics, identified the primary harassment networks, and understood exactly what type of student would become a target. He paused, seeming to consider how much to reveal. I chose to present myself as an ideal victim because I needed to gather evidence of systematic bullying behavior. I made myself appear isolated, vulnerable, and different specifically to attract the attention of students like you. The revelation that Daniel had deliberately made himself a target was perhaps the most shocking aspect of his entire plan. He had essentially sacrificed months of his own well-being to gather the evidence needed to transform the school's culture. Ryan's voice was filled with a mixture of admiration and horror. You let us torture you for months just so you could destroy us. I let you reveal your true nature so that I could provide you with an opportunity to become better people, Daniel corrected. Destruction was never the goal. Transformation was. He opened his tablet one final time, showing them a different kind of presentation filled with success stories and positive outcomes from similar rehabilitation programs. Research shows that people who voluntarily participate in comprehensive behavioral change programs have very high success rates in maintaining positive changes long-term. You have the opportunity to become success stories rather than cautionary tales. The choice Daniel was offering was genuine, redemption through accountability rather than simple punishment through exposure. Connor closed his packet and looked directly at Daniel. I'll do it. The community service, the apology letters, the advocacy work, all of it. But I want you to know that I understand what you've accomplished here, and it's genuinely impressive. Daniel nodded respectfully. Thank you, Connor. I believe you have the intelligence and self-awareness to make meaningful changes. Jake was nodding slowly, his simpler nature allowing him to focus on the immediate consequences rather than the complex psychology involved. I'll do it too. I don't want my parents to find out about any of this, and I definitely don't want to lose my hockey scholarship. Your motivations don't matter as much as your actions, Daniel replied. If you complete the program successfully, you'll discover that helping others actually provides more satisfaction than hurting them. All eyes turned to Ryan, who was still processing the complete destruction of his former worldview. The golden boy who had ruled the school through intimidation and privilege was being offered a chance to rebuild his identity around service and accountability. What about my reputation? Ryan asked quietly. When people see me volunteering at the Asian Cultural Center, tutoring immigrants, they're going to know something happened. They're going to know that you chose to grow as a person, Daniel replied. Whether that enhances or damages your reputation depends entirely on the kind of community this school decides to become. Ryan took a deep breath and nodded slowly. Okay, I'll sign the contract. But Daniel, I want you to know that I'm sorry, really sorry. Not just because I got caught, but because what we did was wrong. Daniel studied Ryan's face carefully, his psychological training allowing him to assess the sincerity of the apology. I believe you, Ryan, and I think you'll discover that genuine remorse is the first step toward becoming the kind of leader this school actually needs. The bathroom that had been the site of their planned humiliation of Daniel Chen had become the birthplace of their transformation into something better. As they prepared to leave, each carrying their packet of accountability and redemption, they understood that their lives had been fundamentally changed by 30 seconds of strategic revelation. Daniel packed his tablet and phone back into his backpack, his demeanor shifting back toward the quiet, unassuming student they had originally targeted. But they all knew now that his apparent vulnerability had been a carefully constructed facade, hiding one of the most sophisticated teenage minds any of them had ever encountered. Remember, Daniel said as they prepared to leave the bathroom, you have until Monday morning. I suggest you spend the weekend having honest conversations with your families about your behavior and your commitment to change. As the three former bullies filed out of the bathroom, each lost in their own thoughts about the magnitude of their situation, Daniel remained behind for a moment to clean up the scattered pieces of his hair from the floor. The physical evidence of their assault would be preserved as part of his documentation, but he wanted to restore some order to the space where his transformation from victim to victor had been completed. The quiet boy who had allowed himself to be terrorized for months had revealed himself to be a strategic genius, operating several levels above his tormentor's comprehension. But more importantly, he had demonstrated that true power didn't come from the ability to hurt others. It came from the intelligence and courage to hold people accountable for their actions while providing them with opportunities to become better. As Daniel finally left the bathroom and walked toward his locker to collect his belongings, he reflected on the fact that the hardest part of his plan was now complete. He had successfully transformed his three primary tormentors from predators into participants in their own rehabilitation. But the real test would come in the weeks and months ahead, as he worked to ensure that their change was genuine and permanent. The revolution at Westfield High School had begun, not with violence or revenge, but with accountability and the radical proposition that even bullies could be redeemed if they were willing to face the consequences of their actions and commit to becoming better people. Daniel Chen had just taught his tormentors the most important lesson of their lives, that intelligence and preparation would always defeat cruelty and privilege, and that true strength came from protecting others rather than harming them. A P. Next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.